Okay. Park City affirms, resolved, the United States should remove nearly all of its military presence in the Arab states of the Persian Gulf. Contention 1 is Yemen. In the most recent report, the UN reports that the conflict in Yemen between Houthi forces and a Saudi-led alliance shows no sign of resolution. MEM from 2 days ago continues that, quote, despite Saudi Arabia's declaration of a comprehensive truce in Yemen, the battles have intensified and the fronts have expanded. Both nations, quote, have been exchanging accusations about which side is violating the truce, with the debriefer finding this morning that both parties have been engaging in violent conflict despite the ceasefire. Starting in 2015, Vital 18 of Brookings writes that the United States has supported the Saudi government in its quest to crush the Houthi insurgency. Because of this, Harb 19 writes that providing the military and logistical assistance which the Saudis need, the United States is playing a critical role in creating what the United Nations describes as, quote, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. In the context of the resolution, a physical military presence in Saudi Arabia and surrounding Gulf countries is essential to this assistance, as Gloister 17 of the Cato Institute writes that modern American military bases are not used for defense, but rather as logistical hubs that support operations beyond their immediate vicinity. Vital 20 continues that the Houthis are winning the war right now, and Saudi is inevitably going to lose, but the US is drawing out the conflict. As a result, removing the American military from Saudi Arabia would end the war in Yemen for 4 reasons. The first is Saudi Arabia's incentive. Bazzi in 2018 explains that the US has, quote, emboldened the region's autocrats to become reckless and brutal. The United States' continued military support has signaled the Saudi leaders that they have the green light to continue the brutal war in Yemen. Bazzi concludes that, quote, Saudi Arabia and its allies are more likely to accept a peace process if it's clear that the US won't provide the military assistance needed to keep the war going. The second is pilots. Taylor 19 writes that the US has deployed 3,000 personnel to Saudi Arabia, including 2 fighter squadrons and an expeditionary wing. Turpak 20 explains that this wing is a unique, highly complex airspace unit composed of US pilots. Not only does this wing ensure that Saudi Arabia can win almost all skirmishes in the air, but Turpak terminalizes that this American pilot force uniquely allows Saudi Arabia to launch highly deadly airstrikes. The third, intelligence sharing. American intelligence is crucial to Saudi war efforts in Yemen. Emmons 19 writes that the United States uses drones and technicians to provide reconnaissance and munitions, targeting over Houthi-occupied regions of Yemen. As a result, DeYoung of the Washington Post explains that Saudi Arabia relies heavily on American surveillance images and targeting information to carry out its aerial bombardment of Yemen. The fourth is training. Salikan 19 of the Middle East Monitor writes that because of poor organization and mismanaged spending, Saudi ground personnel and pilots lack consistent training and therefore competence. As a result, Cohen 19 finds that the US trains, advises, and assists Saudi armed forces through military exercises, which Lenman 19 of the Center for Research on Globalization writes that the US provides instructions on how to operate foreign weapons and directly aids the kingdom's genocidal war in Yemen. For these 4 reasons, Harb 19 concludes that without American presence, Saudi Arabia would have no choice but to end the war in Yemen. This has 2 impacts. First, saving lives. Cockburn in 2018 reports that a civilian is being killed every 3 hours in the fighting. Milband of NPR explains in 2018 that with Saudi Arabia to the north and the Arabian Sea to the south, refugees in Yemen have nowhere to escape, leaving them internally displaced in the country. Second, humanitarian aid. England from the Financial Times writes last week, 14 million Yemeni require immediate humanitarian assistance, which can't be provided if the Saudi onslaught continues. Reuters finds in 17, aid can enter Yemen through any of the various ports where cranes were installed, but Oakford 17 finds that Saudi airstrikes having a chilling effect on aid. The UN and other NGOs are afraid to enter Yemen in fear of coalition bomb strikes or getting diverted once they reach the border. Thus, we affirm.
Can we see the Reuters evidence that says that they can get aid through any of the ports?
Yeah, I'll send it over.
Okay. And we can look at that while I read case, right?
Totally.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I sent the email.
We'll let you know when we get it. and then we'll start reading case.
Just let me pull up the case.
Yeah, we got it. We're just pulling up the case doc. Before we begin, though, just a content warning. Part of our case deals with issues of police brutality and police militarization. Is everyone okay with that? And if they're not, we can have a discussion about how to properly speak about it in the round. That's good with everyone? Okay, cool. Just go fast, I guess.
Okay, is everybody ready? Everyone can hear me? Cool. We negate. Contention 1 is terrorism. U.S. counterterrorism efforts in the Gulf have been extremely successful. The IEP finds in 2019 that U.S. military efforts have reduced deaths from terrorism by 75% in Iraq. Problematically, Schmidt 20 of the New York Times reports that a recent secession of U.S. operations against ISIS has allowed a minor resurgence of the remaining groups to regain strength in Iraq and Syria. A U.S. withdrawal would overwhelm the region with a terrorist resurgence. Alyssa Rubin 20 of the New York Times finds that Iraqi forces would be hampered by a lack of U.S. drone intelligence and air cover. New America 19 continues that vital U.S. training built the current Iraqi counterterrorism force in the ground up. Additionally, Lewis Lovelock 20 of the Washington Post finds that the current U.S. presence in the Gulf provides deterrence. Terrorist groups know that if they attack, the United States can easily destroy them, which is why Belcher of LaGrange College explains that having large numbers of troops on foreign soil reduces annual terrorist attacks from 163 to 9. Walcott 19 of Time furthers that the withdrawal would create a power vacuum in the Gulf and give ISIS greater ability to mount attacks, upending 5 years of counterterrorism progress. Schmidt writes that if the U.S. were to pull troops from true presence in Iraq, the region would be left vulnerable to a resurgent terrorist wave, just like what happened in 2011 when Obama pulled troops out of Iraq. Affirming jeopardizes millions of lives, as Ben Ayyem 20 of the New York Times finds that 40 million civilians are vulnerable to an ISIS resurgence. Contention 2 is police militarization. After the U.S. withdraws its troops from abroad, the War History magazine writes it will have millions of weapons left over in stockpiles. Apuza 14 of the New York Times finds that when the military has surpluses of weapons, they give the state police officers the DoD 1033 program. Thus, Fisher 16 of the Reason Foundation finds empirically that large weapon stockpiles have enabled police officers to load up on state-of-the-art war machines, tactical gear, guns, and explosives. We've seen this historically. Massera 15 of UMajd quantifies that after U.S. troop withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan in 2009, the number of severely militarized departments rose by 28 percentage points. High levels of police militarization exacerbate the problem of police brutality in 2 ways. First is by making them seem invincible. Jesse Singal of the New York Magazine explains in 2018 that giving police military-grade weapons encourages them to see the public as the enemy and act more violently. Second is by mandating excessive force. Amanda Tabb of Vox explains in 2018 that the DoD 1033 program, which supplies weapons to police, requires that all weapons be used within a year, forcing small operations to escalate to SWAT-style raids. The impact is preventing racialized violence. Sigel continues that over-militarization of the police allows for increase in killings and crackdown on freedom of speech and public protest. The BBC found in 2016 that police brutality killed 1,000 Americans that year, most of whom are Black or Latino. Contention 3 is the U.S. security guarantee. Hagerdal 19 of the Center for Strategic Studies explains that U.S. military presence is the best security guarantee available to allies in the Persian Gulf. A sudden U.S. withdrawal disrupts regional stability in 2 ways. First is by scaring Israel. Harel 19 of Haaretz writes that Israel's longstanding fears that Iran have been heightened after recent perceptions of American desire to withdraw from the Gulf. As such, Mazzetti 20 of the New York Times reports that Israel repeatedly pressured the United States to maintain a hardline stance on Iran and increase strikes against proxies in Iraq and Syria. American presence prevents further escalation, as Abbott 14 of U. Lesser warns that Israel is only restrained by U.S. military presence acting as a counterweight to Iran. A U.S. withdrawal would confirm Israeli fears, triggering an Israeli strike on Iran. Critically, Farley 20 of the National Interest finds that an Israeli strike on Iran could easily go nuclear. Haaretz concludes that the resulting war would embroil the United States military in Israel, and Dallas 13 of Biomed Central quantifies that 7 million civilians would be killed. Second is proliferation. Hal Brands 15 at the Foreign Policy Research Institute finds that U.S. security guarantee has prevented nuclearization since the 1950s, from Germany to Italy to South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. Van Jackson 15 of Foreign Policy explains that because U.S. military presence assures allies protection, they are less likely to launch preemptive strikes. J. Wellington Brown 17 of the U.S. Air Force finds that this presence has worked, as allies are not considering nuclearization right now. Absent military pressure, however, Brands continues that the U.S. would lose its non-proliferation leverage, which Brown finds will lead allies like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt to nuclearize. Unfortunately, Hagerdal continues that a U.S. withdrawal from it would spur an arms race, leading to military confrontations between Arab states and Israel. Brown continues that were Saudi Arabia, for example, to nuclearize, Israel would likely attack Saudi Arabia preemptively, resulting in a region-wide conflict. Overall, Douglas Gilbert 05 of the University of Kentucky confirms that arms races increase the chance of war by 500%, and Allison 18 of Kent State explains that when a power has nuclear weapons, it increases the chance of proxy wars by 54%. Thus, we negate.
Yeah, can I see the evidence saying that when the military pulls out, our stockpile of weapons will go to the police force?
Yeah, can you send that to me?
So there's two pieces of evidence. One says that we have a massive stockpile of troops when we pull out, and then there's a bunch of link evidence that says that that gets funneled to the police. Do you want to see just like all of
All
it, or
Just
Yeah.
that funnel to the police.
All of it would be sick.
okay? Wait. Do you just want us to send all of the link cards on C2?
Not really. I just want the
Not
top
all of
part.
the link ones, but like
If
the
you
ones.
want to send them, it's fine. I just want the part, wherever in your link evidence it is, I want where it says that when the US pulls out, the police force will get our weapons.
Okay, tell me when you send the email.
I just sent it. It's 2 cards. The first one is Mazzara. The second one is Fisher.
Yeah, one is just weapons get.
So the second one says that surplus weapons get funneled to the police, and the first one says that when we withdrew from Iraq and Syria, we saw a massive increase in police militarization through the program.
Do y'all mind if I just like read them during cross?
That's fine.
That's chill.
You good for a cross?
Yeah. Okay, can I have the first question?
Go for it.
Okay, so what kind of weapons are the police going to use that were from the Gulf?
Like AR-15s, tanks.
Wait, when's the last time you like tanked a civilian, like on the streets, like brought a tank?
So our evidence says that after we pulled out from Iraq, the number of departments that were militarized increased by 28 percentage points. So maybe
how often do they use those weapons? Like, when do we ever bring like tanks to like
our evidence says empirically that it has increased police brutality. Like, just because you don't know it from your one neighborhood or whatever doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Okay, well, you don't give any neighborhood. Okay, it's fine.
And we give you that it is increased by 28 percentage points. It went from 13% to 42% or something like that. I don't know.
Okay, of the militarization. Okay.
It also might not just be tanks. It's like other tactical gear and stuff. But that's fine. Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we talk about your argument or your
it's fine.
impact about decrease it or
No, it's fine.
what? Okay. Can we talk about your aid impact?
Yeah.
So
What do you want?
Yeah. So why can't people in Yemen get aid right now?
Okay, because the NGOs and these organizations are like afraid to send aid to Yemen because they're getting arbitrarily diverted at the border, and Saudi airstrikes have a chilling effect on aid. Like, the aid just gonna get blown up.
Is the majority
So
of
wait, can I have the next question?
Wait, no.
Wait.
Let me ask you to follow up. All right, let's relax. So isn't the main reason why they can't get aid into Yemen because there's a Saudi blockade on the port of Hodeidah?
No, we just cite like the chilling effect, and our evidence isn't about just the port of Hodeida. It's about like all like the 12 ports in Yemen that are mainly used.
Yeah, but
So why
90%
does Israel?
of
Can I have the
people
question now? That's not really a question. It's like a statement. Why does Israel strike Iran? Like, what's? Can you just explain this?
We say that when the United States pulls out of the region, they fear the U.S. is abandoning them, so they lash out because they fear Iran.
Wait, what kind of strike is it? Is it nuclear or just like a conventional one?
It could be either nuclear or conventional. We say with Iran, it could go nuclear.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So a few of your warrants are about decreasing Saudi Arabia's capability to engage in the war. Would the war end if Saudi Arabia loses intelligence or loses these pilots or training? Like, would the war end because of that?
Yeah, that's what the hard evidence tells you. Without the backing of the U.S. military, Saudi Arabia would have no choice but to end the war.
To end the war. So that's about incentives. So Saudi Arabia, it's not like Saudi Arabia can no longer.
No, it's about like physically capability. Like if they go in without the U.S. support, they're gonna get crushed.
Okay, but they still you need to win your first warrant to win the war ends.
No, no, we can win any of our warrants and still have access to Harb.
Yeah, my question is
that's cross.
All right, we had like 5 seconds left, but sure.
Can we see the hard evidence?
Yeah, I'll send it over.
Thanks. So y'all can send it after first rebuttal. It's fine.
Can I see one more piece of evidence?
Yep.
That I think it's from your second link on your contention too. It's about like mandating excessive force means that the police forces will definitely use these weapons.
The Taub evidence, yeah.
Probably. I ain't catching off your name.
I just sent Taub.
All right, it hasn't come through yet, but I'll start prep when it shows up. All right, we're gonna start. All right, that's stopping.
We have 47 seconds, if you can see the timer.
All right. I can't see anyone, so talk if you're not ready, but I'm gonna start. All right. On C1 terror, turn the argument 4 times. First, because of anti-American sentiment, because the U.S. kills so many civilians while fighting ISIS, for all 17 of the Cato Institute writes that our ongoing military presence has inadvertently fueled anti-American sentiment and created a powerful recruiting tool for terrorist organizations. As a result, a Land 18 of the Independent writes that the number of Islamist militants operating around the globe is nearly 4 times what it was when the U.S. government began fighting terror in 2001. Empirics overwhelmed their link at the point where terrorism is only increasing because of U.S. presence. They're not actually solving anything. But secondly, U.S. military resources end up in terrorist hands. Abulitine 17 from Reuters notes that due to reckless and illegal arms transfers conducted by the U.S., nearly 90% of weapons used by ISIS are from U.S. purchases. But third, U.S. interests fuel terrorists. 1418 from Jamestown Foundation notes that the U.S. values curbing Iranian influence over battling battling Al-Qaeda. That's really problematic because Al-Qaeda is also interested in stopping Iran, meaning that the U.S. turns a blind eye when weapons get into the hands of terrorist cells. Fourth, because they fuel oppressive regime crackdowns. Dune writes that bilateral U.S. counterterrorism efforts with Gulf states have enabled countries like Saudi and the UAE to crack down on citizens under the guise of fighting terrorism. Thus, they conclude U.S. counterterror only fuels aggressive regimes. Then you outweigh for two reasons. First, on probability. You don't know that ISIS will gain any ground in our world because the fight against terror won't actually be harmed because Iran fills in. But you do know that Saudi will be forced to end the war in Yemen if you vote for us because they won't be able to physically continue it. But second, on a prereq, Shrinkman 17 writes that most ISIS recruitment from the Arab Peninsula happens in Yemen as a result of the conflict there. So if we win our case, we win this. Then on police militarization, on the first link for your responses. First, non-unique, we're increasing military spending year after year. That has two implications. A, it non-uniques their argument because they'll retire increasing amounts of weapons either way, but B, on net, the diversion of resources will probably be going toward the DoD, not police forces. But secondly, D-Link, because Dialer 16 writes that weapons are a really minimal part of DoD militarization. Most of the equipment provided through programs includes everyday items like cold weather clothing, and only 4% of the hardware provided by the U.S. military is actual weapons. Also at the point where they read you that tanks are going to be given to like local police forces, we'd say it's probably really unlikely that like your local chief is going to drive a tank down the road to arrest someone. Like it's literally never happened. They have no examples. The third, you turn because militarization increases confidence in police. As Warwick 14 writes, that police militarization increases confidence, or that militarization increases confidence in police by 8% because trust is a prereq to the rule of law. Militarization is an effective vehicle for garnering public confidence in the police force, which is what enables them to do things like target racial minorities without any like consequences. But then on their second link, about like mandating excessive force, we called for their ad that doesn't actually say the police forces use the weapons because they go away after a year, just as like that they go away after a year, like that doesn't win them the link. But secondly, Barble writes that local police forces already have stockpiles of weapons just like sitting in warehouses. We'd say adding 3 more guns to the pile isn't actually going to change anything. They have no uniqueness. But third, you turn because militarization enables the use of because pulling out our militarization enables the use of body cams. Russell 16 writes that the Trump administration is currently forcing more police officers to use body cams in general, especially with higher powered weaponry like the assault rifles they talk about in Cross-X. That means that like even if you buy that their argument is true, like nothing's actually going to happen because now the police are actually like being increasingly monitored because of Trump. Then on the Brooklyn Kenton security guarantee, on the first link of scaring Israel, two responses. First, non-unique. Algae user writes that the GCC is totally capable of like maintaining regional stability. That's why Oscar 15 writes that the U.S. can still limit proliferation in the Middle East, or like if the U.S. pulls out our military. Secondly, even if you buy that conventional proliferation happens in our world, their internal link is that Israel preemptively strikes. That never happens because Iran will never actually nuclearize. They need the financial support from the EU to like actually continue existing as a country, but they know the EU would sanction them if they start to proliferate. That will never happen. But also D-Link, Israel's never going to preemptively strike. Like all of their like super like the liberal Israeli politicians are the ones gaining ground in the current election. They're not the ones who want to preemptively strike. It's the hardliners who are losing power. And the entire Middle East can never nuclearize or proliferate because Sislisky 18 writes that there are no nuclear power plants in the Middle East that allow for uranium enrichment necessary for a bomb, so they would never get it.
What was the last response?
Siklowski, there are no nuclear power plants in the Middle East that allow for uranium enrichment. It's too expensive.
No power plants? Okay.
Yeah. And that is too expensive to enrich.
Okay.
We're on track.
Yeah. We'll start time now.
Okay.
And also I sent the hard card.
pausing prep, can we see the evidence on stockpiles?
Yeah, Jack will send it to you.
We'll resume prep when we get.
Okay, the email should be sent.
Yeah, I'll let you know when we. I just got it. We'll run prep starting now. This is talking about Ferguson, which was a militarized case. Those 30 seconds of prep used. It's going to be top down on my case, all three contentions, and then their case. This may be a little fast. Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
I mean,
It's not like fast, it's like PF fast.
all right, yeah, I'm true.
Okay. I don't even know how to double breathe, so we're chilling. Don't worry. Okay. Is everyone good? Oh, I just got the
Yeah,
other.
sure. I forgot. It was on another page and highlighted. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah. Is everyone good? On contention about terror, they can see the IEP evidence that says that we've seen a 75% decrease in deaths by terror. This is non-unique, takes out all of their terms because it means that terrorism is going down regardless of their wants. Go to contention 2 about the police. The first response is that military spending is increasing. 1, there's no contextualization of how much this increases police brutality. And but 2, our link overwhelms because the evidence from Massera we read says that we saw a 28% increase in militarization after we pulled out from Iraq. There's definitely a much stronger link to the argument. Then they say it's a dealing because it's a small part of spending, but that doesn't matter because our link still holds true. And insofar as the last pullout caused such a massive increase, we say the same thing happens. Then they say that they're not getting tanks. 1, we say they're also getting things like tactical arms. But 2, the Fisher evidence says that they literally are getting tanks. Then they say that you turn it because you increase confidence. 1, there is no warrant as to why it increases confidence. If anything, you can turn the turn against them because if I'm strapping an M16, no one is going to trust me in the streets. Just gut check the argument. Then 3rd, then call the evidence it's bad. Their other team ran on us as well. So they say our evidence doesn't say that the arms go away after a year. Call Talbot, super explicit. It says that because the arms go away after a year, unless you use them within a year, the police are mandated to use them in SWAT-style raids. Then they say that like they have stockpiles. Their evidence is a narrative from one police department in Ferguson, Missouri, and says that they have stockpiles. We agree that they have stockpiles, but that's because Ferguson was already militarized. But there are other police departments that could still be militarized in the event that we pull out troops. Then they say that you turn because of body cams. 3 responses. A is that their evidence is talking about a Trump program that funnels body cams down. So this isn't a turn. If anything, it's just a slight uniqueness issue. But the issue is that body cams are not being used in the Gulf states. So when we pull out those, that isn't the type of military equipment that gets funneled down. But also, they provide no evidence that says that body cams actually saw back for racialized violence specifically. Maybe they decrease the chance that a police officer kills someone, but it doesn't decrease the chance of racialized violence. We say that racism outweighs because Vemi explains that it's a prior ethical question to evaluating frameworks, and Cuomo says that if we prioritize high magnitude impacts over that allows us to continue domestic injustice from state actors. Go to contention 3 about security. So they have functionally conceded the pro-live argument, except for the one response that says that the Middle East can't proliferate. 3 responses. A is that we say even if they can't build them, other nations will stop them, like Pakistan. That was in case and conceded. 2 is that we say that our other allies proliferate, like Saudi Arabia and not Saudi Arabia, South Korea, which means that this is a global proliferation problem, and they definitely have the capacity. And 3 is that Saudi Arabia does have power plants currently, so their evidence is false. This also turns all of case because they've conceded the security guarantee warrant that says that Saudi Arabia will start to lash out and try to nuclearize, which means that Saudi Arabia is not
posturing, they're going to get a nuke, and they're going to take more progressive actions. And also they can see the evidence at the bottom of the case that says that the probability of proxy wars increases 54 times when you have a nuke. That is all conceded. Do not let them respond to it. Go to Yemen at the top. Yemen is an existential conflict that Saudi Arabia will never pull out of. They see Iran as an existential threat. They're never going to pull out of it. But 2 reasons why they will still be able to fight, even if the United States gives out capacity. A, Taraq explains that Russia is going to fill in, and Kropsky explains that they have an incentive because they want to destabilize the Middle East so that they can focus better on Europe. And B is that the United States is still giving them arms sales so they still have capacity. But then 2 general turns. A, Goldenberg explains that when the United States disinvolves from Saudi Arabia, they no longer listen to us on issues of human rights, making the killings worse. And B, Kidajowski explains that if we decrease Saudi Arabia's capacity, that increases the chance of asymmetric warfare, which on net lengthens the conflict, because if one side can decisively win, that ends the conflict faster. Then go to their first argument about the incentive. The hard evidence they said that our arms fight a psychological cover, which concedes the warrant that they need to win the incentive debate and in order to actually prove that Saudi Arabia pulls out, because if they don't, then if Saudi Arabia still has an incentive to fight, then they will fight through other capacities. 3 responses. A, delink it. Ryan explains that the Houthis will negotiate and then violated last ceasefire 241 times. B, turn it. Rogan explains that they are only negotiating right now because they feel secure, but if we pull out, they won't negotiate. And 3, turn it again because Rodan 19 explains that they de-escalated, that the last time we sent in troops, we saw an 80% decrease in violence. Then go to pilots. Their evidence is awful. The Taylor evidence says that the Taylor evidence does not say that the pilots the United States are fighting in Yemen. They're actually fighting against Iran. But B, if the Saudi military has 63,000 pilots themselves, why can't they use those? Go to intelligence. Turn it. Rogan explains that if they don't have intelligence, they'll just start carpet bombing Yemen willy-nilly, which on net increases deaths. Go to training. 2 responses. A, Ali explains that the training program is at home, and so you do not need troop presence. The training program is in the United States. They train them in the U.S. But secondly, you probably still know how to operate. At the bottom, turn it again because the alternative is Houthis, is that the Houthis win the war in Yemen, and that is bad for 3 reasons. A is they increase human rights abuses. B is that they're an anti-U.S. actor, so the United States probably has an incentive to intervene again. And C is that the New York Times explains that the majority of the cholera outbreak is in the area with the Houthis. Finally, on the aid impact, there's a blockade on Hodeidah that stops aid from going in, and Hodeidah is where 90% of the aid comes in, so it's an alt cause. Thank you.
Can I see the evidence saying the Houthis are stopping aid from getting into the country? That they're inherently anti-U.S.
I didn't read the Houthis are stopping aid.
What's the last response that you read then?
The cholera outbreak?
Can you send the card about how like the aid can't get through the port of Hodeidah? 90% of aid goes through there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, whatever that response was, send the cards. Oh, and tell me when you send the email.
just send it.
All right, can Jack just read it during cross and then we can start cross?
Yep, that's chill.
All right, can I take the first question?
Yeah, as soon as I pull up the timer. Yeah, good when you are.
Okay. You say that Ferguson's already militarized. Of the police forces across the US, how many have already militarized?
So the number of police forces that have some degree of militarization is 65%. The number of severely militarized police forces is only 43%.
Okay, what's the actual correlation between pulling out X number of troops to X more forces militarized?
The Massera evidence is possibly the best card. So this is the end of my career. So the Massera evidence is the best card I've cut in my career. And it says that when we pulled out troops from Iraq and Afghanistan, the number increased from 23% to 48%. The study is just looking at what happens when we pull out troops and like militarization.
All right, does the same happen when we pull troops out of other places?
Well, I mean, 2 countries with a small amount of militarization versus 8 countries with even more militarization, I would say yes. And the warrant is that
Sure.
the D-1033 program funnels the weapons down.
Do you want a question? I'm good.
Okay.
If not, I can take more.
So if Saudi Arabia doesn't have the capacity to fight in the war, why does that mean that they lay down their arms?
We say they don't have arms to lay down, period. So like, for example, Saudi doesn't have its own drones. Like the US doesn't sell them drones. We just bring our own in and that's what gives them intel. So, sorry, what were you saying?
Something like a ground force invasion then? Because they still have guns and they still have their own planes.
The Salakanan evidence says that their ground forces, like A, don't have the organization they need to conduct an effective strike. B, don't have the funding they need to actually like give their ground forces things like boots or guns that they need.
So if the United States is still
and C,
selling
the
them
training that
arms,
they
then
need.
don't they have the boots and the guns? And if the training program is in the US, why do we need troops there?
Okay, so under the military definition of military presence, it includes all training programs, regardless of whether they're happening on Saudi soil or US
Military
soil, because
presence
we're
in
still
the
like
Gulf.
training a foreign entity.
But
Can I
it's
take your
military
question?
presence- Wait, 2 seconds. The last thing I want to say on this is that it's military presence in the Gulf, but a training program in the US is military presence in the US. You can
Cool. Well, under the military definition of military presence abroad, it includes training programs because we're still training a foreign entity. It's just in a different
training programs.
Okay, I'm going to take a question now.
Okay, yeah.
So you talk about Saudi Arabia proliferating.
Yes.
Have they already started?
So they have built some dual use reactors, but the J. Wellington Brown evidence that we read says that they don't feel like they need to nuclearize until the
Cool.
United States.
How much uranium can they like enrich with those reactors they already have?
I'm not really sure.
Okay. How long do you think it would take for them to enrich enough uranium and plutonium to actually build a nuclear bomb?
So I don't even think they need to enrich the uranium themselves. They can just buy it from Pakistan.
I mean, it's like, sure. Why would Pakistan want to sell them it?
Okay, so funny thing, my granddad actually like reads all these Pakistani newspapers about this because we're Pakistani. So Saudi Arabia basically like owns Pakistan at this point because they sent them a bunch of money to develop this port in Gwadar, and so Saudi Arabia can literally just make Pakistan do whatever they want.
Cool. Can I see the card for that after cross? Do you want a question?
That's time, and like
Okay.
I don't have that on me. I can look for the.
Do you have any
Pakistani
piece of
newspaper.
evidence saying that they would be able to get nukes from Pakistan, or is that analyzed?
Yeah, we can send
Case.
we can send the card from Case, but I don't have the Gwadar stuff.
Okay.
You can ask my granddad.
That's
but
fine.
it's not right now.
Oh wait, and then can you send the card that says that Saudi Arabia can continue the war in Yemen even without US support?
I read like a bunch of warrants for that. Which one do you want?
Just like the card that says they can still continue without US support.
There's like
There's a lot of
Like I understand the warrants, I just want to see the card that says like verbatim like they can still continue.
like militarily, or they still want to engage in the war.
Militarily.
I sent by from Pakistan.
It's a yellow highlighter.
Yeah. Just let me know when you get it.
All right. I don't have it yet, but it's sending.
Yeah, it's probably just sending. Did you get it yet? Or
No.
But I can just read it.
oh, one of you got it at least?
Yeah, I got it, so I'll just read it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Are y'all running?
All right,
prep?
we're gonna run prep. Yeah. Okay, we have 40 seconds left. Oh wait, there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go down our case and then, no, actually, I'll go down the neg case and then our case. Okay. Start at the top. Extend Caroline's turn about anti-American sentiment. Remember that since we started like putting our military in the Gulf, the terrorism has increased by 4 times. They tried to tell you that there's been a 75% decrease. Realize that's only about Iraq. Ours is about terrorism in general. Our presence in the Gulf is spreading throughout the world. Like people are getting really mad about it. On to their second contention. Extend what Caroline tells you. We're always increasing our military spending, which means A, it's non-unique. We're probably like they're going to get weaponry from something else, and B, we're probably going to send our arms to the DoD, not the police. They try to tell you there's been a 21% increase in the militarization of the police, but they don't actually tell you how much racialized violence has actually increased. Then remember what Caroline tells you, our militarization, which is happening in NEG, is increasing police support, which means that the police can get away with more racist things and do really bad things. Then extend, then remember, the only weighing that they do is they say that it's really racist to like go on low probability, high magnitude impacts. We tell you that Yemeni conflict is not low probability. It's literally happening right now. There's 14 million people. They also can't go for their third contention because their weighing goes against it. Even if also remember what we tell you is that the majority of America in these police departments, they already have the same amount of militarization as Ferguson. They already have the stockpiles. Nothing's really going to change in the AF world. Remember that you don't really know what's going to happen in the neg world, but you do know that 14 million people, Yemeni citizens, require immediate humanitarian assistance. Also on their third contention, even if you somehow let them go for it because they're weighing, like they never respond to the fact that other countries will place sanctions on any country that gives any of these countries a nuke. Now on to our case. At the top, they try to say that Russia's going to fill in. Cole 20 gives 2 unique reasons why Russia's never going to have an incentive to do this. First, Saudi Arabia, if Saudi Arabia is losing, it keeps oil prices high. They have an incentive to do that. And then B, they're already sided with Iran. They put in so much money into Iran's side of the war. Why would they fund a war against themselves? Then you can clump their, then they try to tell you about arms sales. Remember, they can't physically use these arms sales. They don't actually start unless they respond to our case. We win this. Then they try to talk about these human rights abuses. Saudi Arabia doesn't really care about that. We'll get to that later. Then they try to talk about asymmetrical warfare. This isn't responsive to our case, and they don't actually impact out like what the heck this means. There's no offense on it. On our first link about Saudi incentive, Baz 18 tells us that the U.S. is emboldened Saudi Arabia. The only reason they're being reckless and brutal is because they have the backing of the U.S. They try to tell you that like the Houthis are a lot worse, but we tell you that even if Saudi Arabia is going to continue the war because it's an existential threat, even if they have an incentive to do it, they still have a less incentive in the AF world, and even if they're still going to try to invade, they're not going to be physically capable because of our AF case. Go to our third link about intel sharing. They try to tell you that Saudi's going to carpet bomb enough intel. We tell you, Johnson tells us that 60% of Saudi targets are civilians. Haas told us that's intentional because they're targeting civilians. For every 17,000 civilians Saudis kill, the Houthis only kill 5. They're using this precision accuracy to target civilian infrastructure. Luckily, without our intel sharing in these drones, they can't carry out these airstrikes. On training, they say that happens in the U.S., but Haskins 18 tells us that in the military definition, our training, even within the U.S., is still included. Without our training, the military is not going to function, and because it's really poorly organized. What we tell you on aid, 14 million people need aid right now, but they can't get through because of the Saudi airstrikes. No one wants to send aid if they're going to get bombed. The UN says last week the Houthis only tax 2% of the aid. They're local actors. There's no reason why they want to like stop the aid.
We'll run prep time starting now. We have 24 seconds left of prep time.
It will start on our second link on C3 briefly. Then it will go their case, then our contention 2.
Wait. Second link of C3, their case, and then your contention 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Our second link is functionally conceded in the last speech. We say that when the United States no longer gives our security guarantee to our allies, they begin to nuclearize because they worry that the United States is not going to back them anymore. They say that these nations are going to be worried about sanctions. This is a new response, and first summary, you should not evaluate it because it was not in rebuttal. But second of all, we say that if they think that there are tons of, they think that their enemies are existential threats to them, obviously they're not worried about sanctions. They care a lot more about their existence as a nation than a little bit of economic damage. Here's why this ends the round. They've conceded the evidence that says that all our allies globally, like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, fear that the United States could abandon them next, so they begin to nuclearize, which means that you see an 35% increase in proxy conflicts globally. So this outweighs on scope because we're impacting way more nations than they do. It also turns their case because it means that Saudi Arabia and Iran are A, nuclearizing, so they have no incentive to negotiate because they worry that the other nation is becoming more aggressive. But B, if there's a 35% increase in proxy conflicts, and it doesn't matter if we see a small, if we solve one of those proxy conflicts, if more spread out, and we say that we have no incentive to fix those if they're becoming more aggressive, it's game over when they can see that argument. let's go to their case. So there are a bunch of reasons. So they concede at the top that Saudi Arabia has an incentive to engage with Iran either way because they view Iran as an existential threat, i.e. they think that if they don't deal with Iran, it means it could threaten their existence as a nation. We say that means they would turn to other nations. And the B point on this is that they still have arms sales from tons of other nations. They say the United States can't give arms sales. Just because we don't have true presence there doesn't mean we don't sell them arms. We say we'd have an incentive to do it either way because we make tons of money off of it. Yeah, that's basically drop, which means they have the ability to engage in the war either way. Also, let's go to their first link. They've conceded that their evidence that says that just decreasing their capacity is not enough because they need to win, that Saudi Arabia has, psychologically wants to end the war because they always have some sort of capacity. They still have a ground force. They still have tons of other weapons. Yeah, which means that they've dropped conceded. So which means that if they lose their first link, they lose the round. They've also conceded the Rogan evidence that says that that Saudi Arabia, because the United States is backing them, is pushing towards negotiations right now, which is why when we pulled out troops, we saw an 80% decrease in conflict. All right. Let's go to our contention 2. We say that when the United States pulls out weapons, there's the WHM evidence says that there would be millions of weapons left over, which our PUSA evidence says through the DoD 1033 program goes to the police. We got a few responses. First, they say that we're increasing military spending, which means the weapons go either way, but they can see those weapons are going towards the military. So I don't understand why this why this stops our argument. But B, our argument is that when we pull out, we have tons of weapons. There's no warrant as to why an increase in military spending means more weapons for this program. Then they say that you increase police support, but this was not very clear. And also, there's no reason why there would be an increase in confidence or why this changes the amount of racialized violence that happens. Then they say that these organizations are militarized either way. No, that's not true. We say that only 43% of them are, and the last time we pulled out troops, we saw a 28 percentage point increase in militarization. This is bad because we say that when you see increase in police militarization, they feel like they can view everyone as the enemy, and you increase police violence, and they have to use the weapons in 1 year, so you see an increase in police violence because they want to use them to hold on to them. And they've conceded the Memi weighing that says you reject every instance of racism because without stopping the issues of racism, we aren't able to create ethical frameworks in the first place to evaluate other impacts. That's drop.
You all ready for Grand Cross?
Yeah.
Can I take the first question?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so if you weigh on racism, why do you go for your third contention?
To
turn your link.
Okay, do you want a question?
So I think the thing is that if we win both of those, then regardless of whether you evaluate racism first or if you buy your answers to the weighing, we still win. That's the point of it. Okay, can we ask you a question? So your hard evidence says that Saudi Arabia would stop fighting because they lose their psychological cover. So don't you agree that that means that they need to lose the incentive to fight?
No, it doesn't say that. It says they lose refueling, training, and all of the intel they need in order to physically carry out the war. It doesn't say anything about
So the part that
you just said,
in bold and underline, says that the reason they stop is because they lose their psychological cover after they don't have weapons anymore.
Okay, yeah.
So it says they lose the refueling, they lose the air force, but because of that, they lose their psychological cover, and that's why they negotiate. So would you agree that Saudi Arabia needs to want to end the war?
Not at all. So literally all of the uniqueness we read you at the top of case says that Saudi will never end the war of their own accord. That's literally our uniqueness. Then you look to the Glacier.
We're saying that Saudi will never end the war.
We tell you the only world in which they end the war is when you take away their physical capability to continue it. And y'all dropped our third and fourth link, which are both independent reasons why they can't continue the war.
No. So the issue,
we tell you, you're never going to solve for Saudi's psychological incentive to continue the war. The only thing you solve for is their physical ability. Can we take a question?
Just because you stop two,
you can just put this in final focus. It's fine. Can I take a question?
There are not other ways they can engage in the war.
But we've responded to that, which will go in final focus. Can I take a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you talk about how just to clarify, so in your proliferation scenario, in your third contention, it's that our allies like Japan and South Korea proliferate, and that causes nuclear war. Yeah?
That was the conceded proliferation scenario.
And proxy war.
Did that happen in 2015?
Sorry?
Did that happen in 2015?
Was this response read in rebuttal or summary?
Yeah, Jack did clarity weighing.
Clarity weighing?
it was on your case.
Wait, sorry.
No, you just said.
2 seconds. Explain to me what clarity weighing is.
So,
just saying that
I mean, we've given warrants, and we have seen it previously. Like for instance, when the United States, like we've seen it in like in South Korea and Japan previously. So yes.
Like that's why France
Okay.
and UK got nukes, because they were afraid of the US abandonment after World War II. Like when we started pulling back our troops that we had deployed there in World War II, they were like, "Oh my lord!"
Okay, so if our allies already have nukes, why isn't your impact triggered?
Because Saudi Arabia doesn't have nukes, Iran doesn't have nukes.
So the
doesn't have
bright
nukes,
line to trigger
South
your
Korea
impact
doesn't
is when
have nukes.
Iran nuclearizes?
What? No, the bright line is when the
So the-
US pulls out. The argument is about the security
Then our-
guarantee, but that's time.
We'll run the rest of our prep. All right, that's our prep. I'm gonna mirror their order. I'm gonna go their third contention. Actually, I'll go their third contention, their second contention, our case. Okay. They lose the third contention when they drop two pieces of defense. The first, remember, sanctions prevent other countries from selling Saudi Arabia nukes at the point where they concede and cross that the bright line to their impact being triggered is Iran or Saudi Arabia nuclearizing. They also drop the evidence saying that they literally don't have the capability to nuclearize. They can't like enrich their own uranium and plutonium. That'll never happen. But then you extend Jack's clarity weighing. Remember, their entire scenario happened in 2015 when Israel preemptively struck places like Iraq and Syria when they started to like proliferate their nuclear programs. So if their impact was going to happen, there's literally no reason why other U.S. allies like Japan and South Korea are going to start a nuclear war should the U.S. withdraw from the region, especially when the U.S. already withdrew a little bit in 2015 and their impact scenario wasn't triggered. Then go to their second contention. They weigh on racism here. If they lose the weighing, they don't generate any offense. They drop two really key pieces here. First, the term. Remember, we tell you militarization increases support for the police. That's really key because public perception of the police force is the thing that's the distinction between like a police person getting fired when they do something like kill someone when it wasn't warranted versus getting paid leave. We tell you that public perception of the police force is what allows them to do things like unfairly target minority races without consequences. The only world in which you solve for that is the AF, because like our militarization in the Middle East goes away. People don't view the military as like so important to U.S. security. So by extension, they don't view more localized versions like the police as important to U.S. security. Also, they never implicate how much racialized violence increases in the AF. They have no clear impact. So you have to look to our case. Remember, we tell you Saudi Arabia always wants to engage in the Yemeni conflict. That's like the warranting on our case. They say that they'll still engage with arms sales, but Hobbs takes that into account. It says that regardless of arms sales, the U.S. needs like our intelligence or Saudi needs our intelligence sharing in order to do the war in Yemen. That's where you look to our third link. Remember, we tell you that like U.S. intel is used specifically to target civilians. That's why Saudi kills 17,000 people for every 5 the Houthis kill. That intel is what goes away in the AF. That's why you stop Saudi from committing airstrikes. That's really key because our link to humanitarian aid, the Oakford evidence is really clear, is that Saudi can't commit airstrikes even by their argument that they still have ground troops. Our impact is triggered when they no longer have airstrikes. You outweigh on clarity, like they literally don't tell you why their scenario actually gets worse in our world, but second you outweigh on probability. We know for a fact this is going to happen. That's what the England evidence tells us. 14 million people are saved in the AF.
We have 40 seconds of prep time. We'll run it out. gonna go Saudi, my C2, my C3, my C2. Is everyone good? In final focus, there is no interaction with the non-unique that says that this is an existential conflict for Saudi Arabia, so they always have an incentive to engage in. B, the indictment of the hard evidence that says that that Saudi Arabia would only pull out if they lose their psychological cover, which is why their warrants about intelligence would say that there would be a decrease. But they drop the Rogan term that says that the only reason they're negotiating right now is because they feel secure, which means that Saudi Arabia does not pull out. And if anything, this is offense for us, fully conceded, no response, vote F, vote neg. Okay, go to C3 about proliferation. So they extend 3 responses in final focus. All of them are new. None of them were in summary. And also, we've read frontline studies before. First, they say, hey, that the nations would get sanctions. We say these are existential conflicts, so they don't care about a small amount of economic damage. Then they say they don't have capability. The Cropsey evidence says that they can buy it from Pakistan. And also, their evidence is talking about the Middle East specifically. Our evidence is talking about generally other nations. And South Korea definitely can buy a nuke that goes uncontested. And then finally, they say that we didn't see this in 2015 when we pulled out. So, A, this is new. B, that wasn't a full pullout. This is a full pullout. And C is that we have seen past instances like France and Britain. Okay, what's the argument? Our argument is that when you affirm, they lose the security guarantee, which means that these other nations start to proliferate, and so you see conflict break out in a bunch of global hotspots like South and North Korea, and this outweighs because A, it is global, but B, it turns their Saudi argument because it means that Saudi Arabia is not going to negotiate. They concede the Gibler evidence that says you increase the chance of wars, and the Allison evidence that says you increase the chance of proxy wars by 54%, which means that it also turns the link into their case. Go to police militarization. Our argument is that when you pull out, there's a surplus of troops that gets funneled to the police. They have 2 responses at the end. The first is that you increase support for police. They have dropped all of our backlines on this. One is that there is no warrant. It's why there's an increase in confidence. And if anything, confidence goes down when a police officer is carrying an M16. You definitely do not trust that person. And also, this term was not in summary, so you can't evaluate it. And then they say we don't quantify how much racialized violence goes up. We do. There was a 28% increase in the amount of militarized police forces. Our argument is that when military equipment gets funneled to the police, the Taub evidence says that they have to use it within a year, and the single evidence says it makes them feel invincible. Both these are reasons why they increase the amount of killings. We say that there have been 1,000 killings, and they can see the MEMI evidence is a prior question, and there was an 8% increase in racialized killings. And the MEMI evidence is a prior ethical question to fix racism before you can actually evaluate any of the other impacts, and that's straight conceded in the last speech.
Good debate.
Good round, Joe.
Good round.
Okay. Who wants to start? Doesn't matter.
Is the decision fully in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you refresh, it should be there.
All right.
I can start then.
Should we just announce the decision first?
Oh yeah, that would also make sense.
Yeah. The decision's a 3-0 for the negative.
I guess really quickly for me, the framing that Khan reads in rebuttal about looking to racism impacts first is really never touched on my flow by the pro. So at that point, I have to look to this like police militarization argument first. And I think that Khan is winning that pretty cleanly. You guys try and win off of this like turn about like militarization increasing trust, which like increases the capacity for the police to like act with impunity, but like they're kind of right in the sense like you never really read a warrant as to like why militarization increases trust in the police. Like that's not necessarily intuitive for me, and I really don't know why it would ever happen. So you'd have to like make that more clear if you really wanted to win off of that. I also think that they're probably winning some kind of offense off of like your like off these like Saudi Arabia turns and like proxy conflicts and stuff, but at the end of the day I didn't necessarily need to look there because you guys conceded the racism framing, so I just looked at the racism impacts.
I guess I'll go next. Yeah. I agree with the vast majority of that decision. I think all of it actually. The MEMI weighing on racism is conceded, and the argument from HM that this is a prerequisite to other policymaking options means that I evaluate it first. So then here it makes it pretty easy for me to vote neg. I think this warrant about increasing confidence in police is pretty poorly explained until the final focus. And even then, there's no real articulation on why public support and police punishment links into racialized violence, which the neg is pointing out in both of the back half speeches. And the AF is right in saying that there's no quantified increase in the amount of racialized violence as a terminal impact, even if militarization increases. But the MEMI prerequisite argument is not about like a utilitarian understanding of how much violence is increasing, but instead about how we should make policy, which is conceded. But to be fair to the AF, I'm looking at the rest of the flow too. So I think the neg is also ahead on the link debate about Saudi Arabia, because absent a shift in the incentive structure, they're going to find other ways to fight proxy conflicts against Iran. And I also think they're winning the conceded turn that the US presence makes them more likely to negotiate. I probably give the AF some access to this argument that intel sharing is critical to the Yemen conflict continuing, but I think that this argument is vastly outweighed by the proliferation argument that it increases global proxy conflicts that the neg is using from their C3 to turn the AF case. And they're also right in pointing out that the responses about sanctions and the 2015 preemptive strike are both new in the back half speeches. So I vote neg.
Yeah, so I agree with everything they said. I think I look at racism a little bit differently. I would say first, like on the affirmative offense, I just think that props to neg second speaker, that I think that was one of the better coverages and rebuttal that I've seen in a while, in terms of both like rebuilding and getting responses out. And I think that makes the AF summary really difficult. And I think that there are just pieces that get missed, and then neg executes that well. But I think that neg is ahead on the Saudi debate. And I don't think that we're getting very much link rebuild from the AF that actually gets you any of that sort of offense. I think like on the police militarization thing, I think the AF makes some really weird choices in terms of responses here. Like, I don't understand. I mean, this is like, I think a problem with it for the neg that they might want to address later on, but like handguns are like just as bad for like communities of color when coming from police, right? Like a lot of the stories we're hearing about are not M16s being shot at like Black teenagers. It's people being shot in grocery stores and things with just handguns. And so I think the AF needs to be asking more questions on that first cross and throughout the debate of like, where is this actual link to these military equipment? Like, why is that what gives us this racial setup? I also think there's a lot of questions about uniqueness in terms of like a lot of the reasons why this militarization happens is post 9/11, like after like when police decide to be better prepared for terrorism situations. And like, you know, I would argue that if you do a comparative analysis of police brutality, you probably don't see a massive shift recently. We just know more about it because we're actually looking at the research, and I think you could be asking questions about that. Also, I think for the neg, one thing to look into is actually veterans returning to the police force. Like, I think there's actually a big problem with pulling actual people out and then putting, where do they work when they're done with their duty? And when they end up actually going to the police force, there's a lot of statistics out there about like how veterans are actually way worse with communities of color than like a normal person who goes through police academy training. So I think those are just some things on that. I think the MEMI stuff is like, I guess conceded. I'm not the type of judge that's going to like vote for that sort of theory stuff usually. I think my paradigm makes it pretty clear that that's not my like go-to debate approach. But I just also think that it's just not quantified in terms of like, you quantify the amount of militarization increase, but then I'm still left wondering like, what does that mean in the context of all this other stuff? So I think you're probably getting some offense there from the neg, but I actually think the neg is like way ahead on this pro-lif and security guarantees debate, like in other places around the world. I think that like a lot of that just goes dropped in summary, I think. But I also just don't think the answer to the rest of the world, especially Asia, comes until way late in the debate. And that's really problematic. So that's why I vote negative.
Thank you all so much for judging. Have a nice day.
Great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for judging and thank you guys for debating. Good luck.
Yep.
Good job, everyone.